Hi all you wonderful people, welcome to Simply Scuba and welcome to Ask Marc, where I answer all of your scuba diving questions. If you've got any particular questions that you want me to elaborate on and just chat about, then by all means let me know down in the comments below. But this week we're talking about attaching things on BCDs, but more specifically rental BCDs, wetsuits with dry suit seals. Okay, air integration, cleaning pool gear, breathing out of your nose, and semi-dry suits. Okay, so let's jump straight into the first question. Dreoni asks, hey Marc, as a fairly new diver, I'm still renting BCDs where I travel. What is your recommendation for attaching accessories, torches, compasses, SMBs, to rented gear? I guess most BCDs have D-rings, but I don't want to become a Christmas tree. Hashtag Ask Marc. Bolt snaps are your friend. Most of my things have little bolt snaps attached onto them, and they're just tied on with just excess, line from a spool, basically. With most cheap spools, they come overspun. They've got too much line on them, so I usually take off a few meters anyway so that you can actually use the spool correctly, and then I keep hold of that line and then I just use it to tie on little bolt snaps on torches as well, and yeah, that's it. So clip it off onto a D-ring, and then they don't tend to go too far as long as it's not the D-ring on the bottom of the attachments, the adjustment strap of your shoulder strap, because those can get quite long, but if it's on your sort of shoulder, it should be okay. Otherwise, kind of stow it away in a pocket and sort of do your best to sort of not carry too much. If you don't think you're going to need a dive torch, then don't bring one. If you're not going to need everything all on every single dive, but yeah, thigh pockets as well are your friend. If you've got, it'd be too hard to dig it out. If you've got thigh pockets, gives you plenty of storage to be able to stow stuff away nice and streamlined without it like dangling around everywhere. So on most like warm water dives, I tend to have those, and on cold water dives, I've got them fitted to my dry suit anyway. Otherwise, yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, your spool and your DSMB, they tend to go on like a hip D-ring, so they don't like dangle too much. I tend to put a spool on like the back side of my crotch strap, but rental BCDs won't have those, unfortunately. So they tend to be down, sort of lower towards your hips. So that's where I tend to sort of stow it if I'm renting a BCD. Otherwise, yeah, it tends to go in my thigh pockets, so they're a bit more streamlined. But yeah, I'll always have a little bolt snap attached onto all sorts of things. This is a dive knife. And yeah, it makes it a bit more secure. However, as you did say in your sort of question, you don't want things dangling too much, and when you're horizontal, that does dangle a little bit. The way around it with a backplate and harness system is we have those like little bungee straps, but of course then you have to invest in that, and trying to fit that onto a rental BCD is going to be tough. So yeah, the best option would be thigh pockets. It is an investment in your part, but it is not a fruitless investment. I still sort of bring them, because most of my like techie backplate and wing systems don't have pockets in them, but thigh pockets are definitely the way to go. 391 Wombat says, why don't they make wetsuits with dry suit like neck, wrist, ankle and zipper seals? It would be a lot simpler and cheaper than donning a bulky, cumbersome, complicated and expensive dry suit for colder water diving. Compression is probably the main thing. I mean, I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later. The closest to that is a semi-dry, and I'll elaborate sort of on that on a later question. But if you had airtight seals at all appendages, then the air trapped on the inside would compress at depth. With dry suits, we call it a squeeze. It's not so bad with neoprene dry suit, but it's gonna get uncomfortable, and your wetsuit will just, your your dry wetsuit will compress and kind of vacuum pack you into the suit. It is not going to be comfortable. Whereas you have a semi-dry that does allow some water to get in, but quite slow water ingress, and any compression of the air pocket on the inside is negligible, because the water can sort of replace that and equalize that sort of trapped pressure on the inside. So I think that's the main reason why. And you don't have valves on a wetsuit to equalize it and allow it to escape. So I think that's the main reason. I'm sure they would have tried it by now, but no, I don't think it's overly practical. Your best option is something like a semi-dry, which is kind of the best of both worlds, but you are eventually going to get wet. Marc with a C says, I'm very interested in this as my first dive computer. He's talking about a Garmin Descent G1. You answered a similar question over a year ago, but regarding this one, would you miss air integration? Have you had any further thoughts after a year? Yeah, so it's wireless air integration is one of those reoccurring questions, and it's one of those things. It's a really nice feature, but it's not essential. I can't think of an analogy, but it's like one of those features that no one's had it for truth, however many decades that we've been scuba diving. But in recent years, it's come out and it is very, very nice, but it's not essential. So I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't be sort of worried if my transmitter didn't have any batteries for the dive ahead and I didn't have that wireless air integration on my dive computer. It is one of those things that all you have to do is just check your SPG from time to time. That being said, the features are really handy. And quite practical, with sort of knowing your gas time remaining and all that kind of stuff. Instead of just telling you exactly how much gas you have, it tells you how much gas or how much time you have based on your breathing rate and your depth and remaining tank pressure and all that kind of stuff. It tells you it will last so many minutes. But would I not buy a dive computer because it didn't have wireless air integration? No. If it was a fantastic dive computer like the G1 is a cracking dive computer, but okay, it doesn't have wireless air integration, so that wouldn't put me off buying one. If I didn't have my my Shearwater Perdix AI, would I specifically sort of go down the cheaper route, knowing that it was available on a different model? I don't know. In the back of my mind, it always says, oh, buy cheap, buy twice, because you know that down the road, there's a chance that you might want that feature. If you don't use it, fine, but if you want to, then you have to then buy the whole thing again, but more expensive, so you're wasting even more money. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's wireless air integration is a lovely feature on a dive computer, but it's not an essential feature on a dive computer. And I wouldn't worry about not having it on my dive computer. Like wireless charging on your mobile phone. My phone at the moment doesn't have that wireless charging thing where you can just put it on a pad. Am I upset about that? No. It's one of those, it's a nice feature so that you can just sort of do this, but it is not on my phone. It doesn't bother me that much. So no, I wouldn't worry too much about not having it on your dive computer. Kilbofragins, awesome name, says, hi, I was wondering what effects pool sessions might have on gear, specifically regulators and backplate and wings. Is there a way to reduce any effects or a specific cleaning routine afterwards? I have some dive training coming up and just worried about damage on the kit. Chlorine is the main one. It's depending on the material, chlorine can discolor it quite quickly, so just giving it a good wash is your first port of call to make sure that the chlorine is sort of flushed out. Otherwise, hanging it up in like pool room areas for a little bit is fine, so it can drip dry, but not too long, because then mold can form. They're quite warm, humid environments, and the school masks, they were awful for it, because yeah, they're just hung up. Even though they're going in and out of chlorinated water day in, day out, the mold still forms, because they're then hung up, and they kind of sit there, warm, humid, moist environments. Mold loves it. So so we used to actually have a freshwater dunk tank out, or in the pool room, out of the pool, obviously. So afterwards, you'd break all your kit down, you'd dunk it in, and then hang it up so it could drip dry. The chlorine is going to help you out with killing a lot of nasties, so a little bit on the inside isn't the end of the world, but I'd still flush it out. So yeah, as soon as you're done with your pool training, get out. If there is, we used to have a shower. After we got rid of the dunk tank, we had a shower fitted, which just had a freshwater feed, obviously, and I just used to take a shower wearing my kit, still pressurized and whatnot, and then break it all down. And your regulators with the hoses, if they're rubber hoses, you do have to sort of give them a good wash and a clean to make sure that they don't go, they can go quite brittle. I visited a diving pool, and you had to use their regulators, and the hoses were just flaking, because they were just used constantly in this water. So it's quite important that you look after rubber hoses. Never push your purge button. Make sure that the inlet valve to your first stage, cover that with your thumb, not your dust cap, because the dust cap keeps dust out, doesn't keep water out. Give them a sort of a wash and a flush. Make sure that they drip dry, and make sure there's no water trapped on the inside. Otherwise, yeah, it mainly comes down to washing it with fresh water. I wouldn't worry too much about soap. Soap is more to kill nasties if you're diving in fresh water or out in the ocean where there can be microbes and stuff. In the swimming pool with the chlorine, that tends to get rid of a lot of those, but you want to get that chlorine away from the materials. There are some nowadays. The Aqualung Pro HD had, I can't remember what it was called, but a special treatment to the material, so the black stayed black longer, didn't turn to that like brownish color that old BCDs tend to go. But yeah, it is not unusual for pool kits to discolor faster than outdoor kit, and that's mainly down to the chlorine. So yeah, give it a good wash on the inside and the outside, and leave it to dry, but don't leave it in that sort of warm, humid environment. John Montgomery says, "Hey Mark, I've noticed whilst in Bonaire last year that whilst diving, when I was breathing out of my regulator, a small amount of air was coming out of my nose. My mask was filling with air and bubbles were escaping from the top of my mask. This caused a serious fogging issue. No matter how hard I tried, a small amount still comes out of my nose. Diving with a constantly fogging mask is no fun. Have you heard of this, and do you have any suggestions?" I mean, the main thing is sort of airway control, but you're obviously aware of the issue, and it could be something physiological in your like ear, nose, throat area, all those kind of things. There's lots of complicated things, and it's hard to just say, oh, well, just don't breathe out of your nose, because it's easier said than done. So I'd go down the more defog route, how to sort of prevent it. There are a couple masks nowadays. You have the Cressy Calibro and the, I can't remember the new one. I think it's called the Quantum. They just released it, or they just announced it this year. I haven't actually seen one yet. And they have special sealing surfaces on the inside that even if you do exhale through your nose, it doesn't flush up over the lenses, so that helps to reduce sort of any fogging up. The Quantum actually has heat sinks on the skirt around the side to help sort of equalize the, it just acts as a heat sink basically. There are some films that you can use. On my backup mask, I have it's a bit like a screen protector on your phone, but it goes on the inside of your of your mask, they do it in like single lens and twin lens designs, and you just stick them on the inside. They don't come, or at least my one hasn't come unstuck if you take it off, and it is just this surface that doesn't fog up. It doesn't allow the condensation to form on that specific film, so less mask preparation and spit and defog and all that good stuff. So that would probably be my recommendation, to sort of look down those kind of routes. Either a new mask with that sort of internal seal that helps reduce fogging anyway, because I took a brand new Calibro straight out of the box and just put it on my mask and just blew out through my nose, and it took a long time. Normally it's instantaneous, it fogs up, especially with a brand new mask, but even with that one, it took quite a lot of exhaling to get any kind of fogging up. I haven't tried it with the new one. I think it's called the Quantum. Have a look, because that's quite clever. I don't know if it's available yet, but that would probably be my suggestion to look around, because unless you talk to like a ear, nose, throat doctor who can diagnose and see if there's anything that they can do, that's probably going to be like surgical. So I probably wouldn't recommend that kind of things. But yeah, I'd go down that sort of mask mechanical route to help prevent the defog and just allow a little bit of gas. Because breathing out of your nose during a dive isn't a problem. If anything, it's quite good because it helps you equalize the mask and you get less mask squeeze. But yeah, to be able to really self-adjust your airway control, that's probably going to be quite tricky, especially if you've already tried that option. Johnny Schilling says, can you explain the difference between a semi-dry suit and a wetsuit? Yeah, so nice quick sort of question. I mentioned semi-dries earlier, but I'll spend a bit more time on them here. So a semi-dry suit is kind of a wetsuit on steroids. They have sort of a better zip. It's usually a dry zipper. They usually have neck dams, so you have a second section of neoprene underneath that zipper that really helps to slow water ingress. But at the end of the day, they're still effectively a wetsuit. You can't call them a dry suit, but they're a mostly, or you start the dive off dry, and then eventually the water gets in. It's a matter of, you'll jump in, and normally in a wetsuit you get that cold chill coming straight down the back of your neck, and oh yeah, get used to that. Eventually your body warms it up. But with the semi-dry, no, you start off the dive, you jump in, and you're dry. Even under the water, you start your descent, you're still dry. Water slowly starts to creep in, but you don't really notice it. It's one of those things where they're just that much more effective. The seals are more efficient, and just the whole construction, even down to like the seams, they'll use like double blind stitch, so the stitching doesn't go all the way through the neoprene and then double back. It goes about less than halfway through and then doubles back. And on the inside you'll often have tape. On the outside, the seam will probably be glued as well, and these are all different things that help to stop water from just seeping through that stitch hole. Eventually water is going to get into the suit just like a wetsuit, but for the first 20 minutes or so, maybe, depending on how much you move and how well the suit actually fits, you're probably going to stay dry on the inside, which in turn means that you're staying nice and warm. But they're not going to have the inflate deflate valves and all that kind of stuff. They're going to act very much like a wetsuit, but for the first 20 minutes they're going to have the sort of almost thermal benefit of a dry suit. They're that very middle ground, and it's mainly down to the seals, the zipper, and a lot of them have integrated hoods as well, so there's no break in the neck. Yeah, that's the basic difference. Semi-dries tend to be quite thick as well. They're made out of thicker neoprene. Hollis, I think, just announced their I think it's a 5.4mm, which makes sense. They also do a 7mm of their what is it, Neo Dry, I think they call it. So that's a bit more of a warmer water semi-dry, but it's probably going to be warmer than a traditional 5mm wetsuit. But yeah, basically a semi-dry is just a wetsuit on steroids. It's that halfway between. That's why it's called a semi-dry, but you will eventually get wet. And that's it for this week. Thank you so very much for all of your questions today. Again, very interesting questions, heading into semi-dry territory and sort of clipping things off. I think I did a video on how to tie on a bolt snap years and years ago. And the reason why you do that, I probably didn't sort of mention that at the time, is just so that if it gets snagged for whatever reason, you can actually cut that that line off, instead of like a split ring or something, a metal split ring, that if it's caught up in something and it's holding you in place, you're not going to be fiddling with a split ring to try and undo it. Whereas with some real line, if you need to, you can cut it free and free yourself. So that's why we use that. But yeah, if you've got any interesting questions, by all means, let me know down in the comments below. And if you type the hashtag Ask Marc either at the beginning or the end of your question, it doesn't matter, as long as it's there somewhere. It gets put to one side so that I see it, and I'll mention it in next Friday's show. Any links to any products and stuff that I've mentioned will be put either up in the cards or down in the description below. Remember to head over to simplyscuba.com as well. Thank you so very much for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.